I am recording this, so it will be posted on our website. I'll show you where towards the end of the conversation. But the slides, the presentation is currently on our website. Hopefully you received it via the reminder email I sent last week, and I will show you where and how to navigate to that later on in the conversation as well. So thank you again for joining the call. It'll take about 30 minutes or so of information, and then I've left some time at the end for questions. I'll be monitoring the chat box though as we move through the conversation. So feel free to put your questions there or comments there, and then also towards the end we can move to the telephone if needed. So with that, we are going to go ahead and get started. I am your host. I'm Mary Cannon. I'm the Director of AmeriCorps with Serve Ohio. And today we're going to do an introduction to Serve Ohio and to AmeriCorps. Serve Ohio, we are technically the Ohio Commission on Service and Volunteerism, and our mission is to strengthen Ohio communities through AmeriCorps and volunteer engagement. We administer grants in Ohio under the Federal National Community Service Trust Act of 1993. And our mission is to provide Americans with service and volunteer opportunities. We currently administer just over $8.6 million in partnership with 24 organizations across the state, as well as with over 500 sites, service locations, and those locations support 900 AmeriCorps members. So there's 900 AmeriCorps state members across Ohio. So what is AmeriCorps? It is one program of the Federal Corporation for National Community Service, or CNCS. That's our federal funding agent. That program is national, and it engages more than 80,000 individuals across the country for a term of national service. The website is nationalservice.gov, and you can learn more about CNCS and just AmeriCorps and other AmeriCorps programs at that website. You can think of it as the domestic Peace Corps, if you will. It is a term of service to our local communities, just within the states instead of abroad. There's certainly distinct components to Peace Corps and AmeriCorps, but it's just an easy way to equate the program. There is a video here that you can link to, just talking about what is AmeriCorps, and it can help you navigate some of the language and some of the different funding programs, which include Senior Corps. NCCC is the National Civilian Community Corps, and then another AmeriCorps resource, or CNCS resource, is the Volunteer Generation Fund. So what is an Ohio AmeriCorps program? So what we do in partnership with organizations is help them design AmeriCorps programs and AmeriCorps member positions that address locally identified community needs. And to address those needs, they directly engage the AmeriCorps members and or community volunteers. Grants are provided to those partnering organizations, and they operate the program to strengthen their organizational capacity, as well as their perhaps partner capacity to meet a community need. The program must be in line with that organization's mission and enhance, augment, or expand services. It is not meant to displace or duplicate current services or activities. What can an Ohio AmeriCorps program do? We have a lot of opportunity across Ohio to address a variety of needs. This is not an exhausted list. Like, there are multiple interventions and activities members can do, but just to give you a framework in terms of some examples, they can help individuals find safe and affordable housing. They can do education awareness on a variety of perhaps public health topics or literacy topics. They can connect individuals with health resources. They can mentor youth and adults around different activities. They can work to improve high school and college graduation rates, help youth reduce obesity, and well as supporting GED attainment and school performance. So lots of opportunity for AmeriCorps members. The apex to AmeriCorps programs are the AmeriCorps members. They are the ones who are providing that list of interventions or activities that we just shared. So they are the AmeriCorps members are providing what we'd call a direct service activity. So they are in the communities, in the agencies, in the schools, in the institutions that are the point person for providing a service. They connect families to a variety of resources such as healthcare or housing, implement programming, perhaps nutrition and physical education programming, help veterans seek employment, translate their experience into their civilian life, tutor, mentor students and adults, and perhaps maybe do some environmental education programming. So just to give you some examples, the important piece here is that it's the AmeriCorps members that are doing those activities. So what is an AmeriCorps member? They are an entity, an individual that has signed up with an AmeriCorps program. So an organization that has received an AmeriCorps grant has an AmeriCorps program, and part of that AmeriCorps program is engaging AmeriCorps members, and they can do that in a variety of what we would call terms of service, ranging, it's all related to the number of hours the AmeriCorps members must do under the confines of the an annual AmeriCorps grant. So they can do 300 hours all the way up to 1,700 hours. 1,700 hours is considered a full term of service. Then those individuals must be eligible to serve in terms of being a U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident alien. They must be at least 17. If that is the case, they have to have a parent or guardian signature, but there is actually no upper age limit. We have members serving in their 80s, 70s, 80s. So there's no upper age limit. However, if you have a program that would be kind of a peer-to-peer model, for example, so maybe you would like seniors supporting seniors, you can certainly have some age requirements around what that would mean for your program, but it has to align with your program goals. So, but from an AmeriCorps standpoint, they can be as young as 17, and there's no upper age limit. And the median age limit or age of a service member in Ohio is actually in their 30s. So we have a broad range of members serving across the state. Those members receive what's called an Eli Siegel Educational Award. So going back to those terms of service, if they complete their term of service in terms of their hours and all required elements of their service, they get an educational award. You can think of it as a scholarship. They have up to 7 years to use it, and they can use it to pay off existing school loans or to go back to school. And then members receive a modest living allowance. So it's not a wage, it's not an hourly paycheck. It is a stipend that helps cover basic costs. Full-time members then are also eligible for health insurance, and depending on the member's situation, if they're serving full-time, and they may be eligible for child care from CNCS as well. So the program may set some eligibility criteria around if there's skill set or experience that they want their members to have. You can set some other eligibility criteria. They also all AmeriCorps members have to pass background checks. So that is a requirement across all AmeriCorps programs. And they must get things done. These are individuals who've signed up to commit up to a year of their life to their communities, and so they are charged with getting things done. And so the AmeriCorps services and activities are provided by the AmeriCorps members. This is a very different resource. The programs really support the infusion of human capital within organizations. So these are not, the resources are not, are very unique in the terms of they're not foundational support. It's not private support to provide general operational dollars. This is really to support on a specific initiative and the members supporting that initiative. So who's eligible to apply? very wide open in terms of opportunity for organizations to apply. They do have to be a nonprofit, so a for-profit entity cannot apply, but they can come in a lot of shapes and sizes. We have nonprofit organizations that serve everything from specific neighborhoods to across the state, to regional-based organizations, faith-based, secular organizations, government. They can be local, county, state, educational institutions, higher ed institutions, school districts, service centers, you name it. So let me go, well, let me stop there. Does anyone have any questions at this point? I don't see any in the chat box, which is fine. And so let's continue on in the dialogue. I want to highlight some documents that are currently available for you. So all of this information is on our grants funding page, and I'll go to that in just a little bit. But on the grants funding page, you'll find multiple documents that you'll need to become familiar with. There's the Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO, and that includes all the narrative pieces that are required in a grant application. There's the application instructions, and that's important for the budget. So every grant application will have a narrative piece as well as a budget, an annual budget. And so you'll want to become familiar with the budgeting guidelines, and those are in the application instructions. There's also something called the Mandatory Supplemental Guidance. It's just a fancy word for glossary, and it has some definitions and details of some language that you may see in the Notice of Funding and Application Instructions. So that can be a supplementary document that might be helpful if this is new to you. There's also the Intent to Apply, and I will talk a little bit more about that. And that is not required to apply, but it does, it is an opportunity for feedback in terms of your program that you're thinking about. So we can talk a little bit more about that. What is required in addition to the application is the financial management survey. That is a required additional document, and that's available on our website, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move through. So I just want to highlight there's quite a few different pieces of information that should be reviewed and in tandem to each other. They're complementary and supplementary, so please review that information. So let's talk about, in the Notice of Funding, it lists the funding priorities. So CNCS and Servo Highway identify funding priorities each year. One being this year's economic opportunity. There's some very specific evidence-based interventions that CNCS has identified and are available for your review. You can go to that document. It's not very long, but it just highlights some interventions that have been that are evidence-based, as well as just generally programming and interventions around increasing economic opportunities for communities, around workforce development, and then increasing access to information and resources to safe, healthy, affordable housing and opportunities for more efficient housing as well. Under the focus area of education, just looking at more evidence-based programming, supporting early education, K through 12 success, and post-secondary supports as well. Under the focus area of healthy futures, there's a list of evidence-based interventions that you can find on that document there. And then just generally speaking, programming around reducing and preventing prescription drug and opioid abuse, in supporting communities and individuals and increasing access to health information, knowledge, resources, and/or services. The other three priorities for this Notice of Funding is veterans and military families, so supporting their quality of life and supporting their families. Rural intermediaries is more of a model, so supporting rural communities through a partnership or intermediary model, and then faith-based organizations providing any of the above interventions. So they're pretty broad priorities, and you may find that you fall under multiple priorities, and that's fine. That certainly can happen. You would just have to, if you plan to apply, identify which would be your priority focus area or activity, and that's fine. You can fall under more than one or two. There's more information in the notice of funding, as well as in the supplementary guidance. So I would suggest reading that information in terms of the funding focus areas and priorities. And then if you need more information, if you're not sure where your activity would fall under or where your proposed program would fall under, we can certainly have that conversation as well. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about just what would be included in an Ohio AmeriCorps grant. So grants include a specific request for AmeriCorps member positions. So they include the number of how many AmeriCorps member positions you would like, as well as the type of slots or service terms those members would fill. And we have a variety of those. And the purpose of this is to be very flexible, but yet intentional on how and when the AmeriCorps members are providing their service activities. So we have full-time positions, which is 1,700, three-quarter time positions, which is 1,200, half-time, which is 900 hours, minimum time, which is 300, and quarter time, which is 450 hours. So that hourly requirement is how much time and hours one AmeriCorps member would have to commit to your program in 1 year. And you can do a variety of slots. They don't all have to be full-time. They don't all have to be half-time. You can be very specific on the member slots and service terms you would like in your program. Now, each of those member positions is an equivalency of what's called a member service year. So AmeriCorps members are not employees of the program or the organization that receives the grant or hosts the AmeriCorps member. And so instead of an FTE, they're called member service years, or MSY. And so you can think of it an FTE, but they're not an employee. So one full-time AmeriCorps member is the equivalent of one MSY. In the notice of funding, it does tell you the equivalency of MSYs and the number of hours for each of those slot types. So in a grant request, you must request at least 5 member service years. So that can be, for example, met by doing 5 full-time members, or 10 half-time members, or 25 quarter time. There's really a variety that you can do meet that requirement. But if you have any questions about how to figure out that request or how to allocate those MSYs or what a member service year is, we can certainly talk about it. But I like to bring it up in this presentation because it's mentioned multiple times in multiple locations within the notice of funding and application instruction. So in order to be an eligible request and a compliant request, you have to include at least 5 MSYs in your grant application. Then the organizations that receive the grants are responsible for recruiting, selecting, supervising, and monitoring the AmeriCorps members that serve in their program. So, and then those AmeriCorps grants, in addition to the member supervision, as a federal grant, have required financial and programmatic reporting as well. So just some high-level introductory fiscal pieces. Grants provide partial funding to support the programs. There is a match. So in the first 3 years of the grant, it is at 24% of the total grant cost, and that can be met through cash and in-kind resources. It cannot be solely in-kind because it is of the mechanisms to support the members, but it can be met through cash and in-kind resources. And in-kind resources can be staff time, It can be supplies. It can be professional development. You can get quite creative, really, in terms of in-kind and cash support. Um, and then the amount of the grant request is tied directly to the number of members that you're requesting. So depending on how many MSY you want in your program, 5 is the minimum, but you can request more than that. And those dollars are tied specifically to program expenses, such as the member living allowance, any related benefits, member staff training, supervision, supplies, and program monitoring and evaluation. There are some great benefits to an AmeriCorps grant in terms of your organization. It certainly expands the capacity of your organization to meet the identified critical need and can help bring in support partnerships and develop new initiatives around or expand resources or build on elements of what you're trying to accomplish within your organization. It is a national initiative, so it introduces you to a national network of organizations. And here in Ohio, we regularly bring together all of our AmeriCorps programs. So AmeriCorps program staff and organizations have opportunity to connect and support their work. Allows organizations to recruit individuals from the community in which they serve to become AmeriCorps members. So if you have a specific constituency or targeted population that you work with, this could be an opportunity to engage them as AmeriCorps members and obtain professional development, training, and a living stipend and an ed award. So great opportunity for entities within your organization and current stakeholders, perhaps. Then those individuals gain a better understanding of your community need and how to help help solve those, be a solution-oriented individual. And then those members, they gain skills, experience, the ed award, as well as stipend, and a great entrance into 1 million plus individuals who are an alumni of this program. So it's a great opportunity for individuals. So Serve Ohio, so we administer the program. We also want our programs to be successful, and we support our programs on a day-to-day basis and help them provide access to training and technical assistance. As I said, we regularly bring our programs together to share resources and continue their development. We also do site and monitoring visits. We want to make sure you're compliant with state and federal regulations. So we come out at anywhere from once a year to 4 to 5 times a year to do monitoring and site visits. And we'll meet with members and other stakeholders, and we'll do outreach as well, communicate with the current administration and local supporters around the great things that are happening in your community. And we have amazing staff here at Serve Ohio that support our programs on a daily basis. So let me share the timeline with you. This is just an introduction to AmeriCorps. So the next webinar is going to be more in depth in terms of what you put into an application. So we'll go over the application details. What are all the components? What information do you need? Where do you find the information? So that will actually be a good hour-and-a-half long conversation via webinar on all the components of an application. And then in March, we'll convene in Columbus and actually do a grant workshop for half a day, where we'll go into much more detail of the pieces of each grant application. So, and that we will actually do a budget component as well, working through a budget, how to put together a budget for your application. And then the deadline is April 8th by 5 p.m. And so that is a hard set deadline, and it includes not only your application, but any additional documentation that would be required of you, including like the financial management survey. So April 8th is the deadline. Just coming up on a couple of months. So I recommend reviewing the material. So let's go to the website. And I am going to pause the presentation 1 second as I navigate to our website and show you where you can find this information. And hopefully, okay, great. So let me just scroll up real quick here. So this is our website, serveohio.org, under grants funding, and then AmeriCorps funding. This takes you to this page, and you're going to scroll down to the current funding available. This is all the information that I discussed on those 2 slides. So here is the notice of funding. You'll want to read that in addition to the application instructions, which includes the detailed budget requirements. There is the mandatory supplemental guidance, or glossary. There's also something here called National Performance Measure Instructions, and I'll go over that in more detail in the next webinar. Here's a financial management survey, and this is required for new applicants. It's not a long document, but I would print that out or forward it to your fiscal department or grants officers, perhaps, that might need to review that information. Here is the application timeline, and then here's the intent to apply. So let me just pop this up really quick. Hopefully this works out okay. It is a Word document so that you can copy and paste or fill in the blanks. So let me zoom in really quick. The deadline for feedback. So as I said, the intent to apply is not required, but it is recommended for new applicants. And I'll tell you, and I'll show you why. You would actually get feedback from me about your program in terms of, what's not clear. Are you proposing activities that are prohibited? There is a list of those. So, and so this just gives you a summary in terms of the purpose of the funding. Here is the AmeriCorps funding priorities, again, that we talked about in a condensed format. Note, though, and it says this in the notice of funding, you do not have to fit under a funding priority to apply. Here is the eligibility pieces. This, again, talks about member service years. And this is, this is related to mostly current and former applicants. So if you scroll down, so then this starts the materials that you would need to send to me. This has obviously the organizational information, and then the type of organization you are, applicant that you are, proposed focus areas. If you fit under a priority, you would include that there, and then the number of positions and how many for each slot type you would want. There's 2 different types of grants, and I'll talk a little bit more on the next webinar about cost reimbursement versus fixed cost requests. And then you can tell me if you plan to attend or have attended either of these. So this is the second section is what we call the program narrative. This is where you would provide responses as much as you can to these questions. You may not have every detail at this point, but a general response is fine. And you would send this to me no later by the end of March for some feedback that you would get. So it's things like, what is the community need or issue you would like to address? What activity will the members do to address those needs? Who's on the receiving end of those services? Are they new activities? Are they, do the activities exist somewhere else, but you'd like to do it in this new area or new arena? And so you may not know all these. It's really about just giving me, as much detail as currently available and go from there. So that's the intent to apply. It is not required, but suggested for applicants, new applicants in particular. Okay, let me go back to the presentation. I also suggest just looking, this is a link to our current program directory, and it also includes a map of all of the services and members and programs. Maybe look to see what's already in your community. And then that is my contact information. And that is the end of the presentation. Are there any questions for me? I'm going to unmute the lines if I can. And if there's any questions, I can try to address those now, or feel free to also follow up with me via email or phone, and perhaps we can schedule a time to talk if you have specific questions or needed to get anyone else in on the conversation. We can certainly follow up on that as well. Not seeing any questions, that's fine. I would suggest now reviewing those materials, going over the information, and then following up perhaps with me and your team on any questions you may have in terms of next steps. Hopefully you'll join us for the next webinar that will go over the application materials in much more depth. So we'll spend a good hour and a half on the webinar, going through all the materials, and we can have a question and answer session then. And I'm trying to, let's see. I know, Laura, I can't hear you. So let me see if I can. Laura said she had a question. Let me see if I can. It says you're muted on your end. Is there a way to unmute you, Laura? Let me see if I can hear Annie. Annie, are you speaking? Because I can't hear you. Are you there? Now I hear something. Annie? Unfortunately, I can't seem to hear you, Annie. You're not showing as muted on my end. Annie, how about this? Why don't you give me a call after the webinar and we can talk through it. I don't know. You're not muted on my end, so I'm not sure what the issue is. Does anyone have, Annie, we'll follow up. Laura or Annie, give me a call. Sounds good. Thank you. Any other questions? And I'm sorry if I can't hear you, but I don't see any. I have everyone unmuted at this point. Okay, well then I will end a few minutes early, and you can get the rest of your perhaps lunch hour back. So feel free to reach out to me, and hopefully we can connect in February on the next presentation. Plan on a lot more detail in terms of the application content and requirements to be shared on that presentation. So just send me an email, an RSVP, so I know you're attending, and we'll go from there. Please give me a call or email as questions arise, and I look forward to hearing from you, and thank you for your time today. Have a great day.